Welcome to everyone who is attending. This is our Academic Resilience Series. We're glad to have you with us today. We have a number of attendees today. It looks like we have a nice turnout, but in addition, this webinar is recorded and it's placed onto the webpage for the Academic Resilience Series, which we know our faculty use as a resource for their classes. So again, thank you for being here and welcome. My name is Dr. Ann Gadino. I am one of the directors of the series together with Dr. Margaret Mabinjo. We'd like to share a little bit about our panel today, the topic being building better habits to achieve academic success. And so excited to have this panel, which is being moderated by one of our nursing faculty, Dr. Sue Moyer, and several panelists who are students within the Doctor of Nursing Practice program, including Kelly Founderhoff, Laurette Flannery, Heather Shuker, and Dr. Brian Weinberg, Wansidler. I hope I've said all of your names correctly. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Dr. Moyer.
Thank you, everyone. So it's great to be here today, and we're hoping we'll get our other panelists on here, Dr. Laurette Flannery here soon, but we'll go ahead and begin. So yes, we're going to discuss how to build better habits to help achieve academic success, but I'm hoping that anybody that's listening today will find that what we're going to discuss might be helpful for achieving academic goals, but also personal or professional goals. But before we begin, I do want to hand it over to our panelists and just give them an opportunity to provide a little bit more about who they are, what they do, and maybe just a brief identify what you worked on for your doctoral work. So we'll go ahead and I'll kind of pick out everyone so that everyone has a chance to go. So we'll start with Heather. You're up and near me, so on my screen. So we'll start with you first.
Yes, hello everyone. My name is Heather Shuker. I am a practicing nurse practitioner. I'm a primary care provider. My doctoral project is currently on dietary self-monitoring for weight loss in adults with obesity. So this topic is near and dear to my heart as far as helping people lose weight by tracking their diet.
All right, great. Kelly, go ahead.
So my name is Kelly Founderhoff. I'm a current doctorate student at Millersville. I'm a psychiatric nurse practitioner, and I also work with addictions. My project for my DNP is regarding substance abuse treatment and kind of educating primary care nurse practitioners on how to implement substance abuse treatment. So I also, a big part of substance abuse is habits. So this is also near and dear to my heart.
Wonderful. Great. Dr. Brian Weinberg Wansidler, one of our graduates from our DNP program.
Yes. Yeah, graduate 2021. So yes, I'm Dr. Brian Weinberg Wansidler. I am a general surgery, or I'm a nurse practitioner that works in general surgery and bariatric surgery. I'm also adjunct faculty at Millersville University. My doctoral project was on providing healthcare education on the LGBT community for healthcare providers to better educate them and how to care for the LGBT community.
All right, and then when Dr. Laurette Flannery joins, she also is a graduate from our DNP program from 2021, and so we can allow her to have an opportunity to introduce herself and join the discussion then. So before we get started, just as the moderator, I wanted to provide just a brief overview or background in how we are framing our panel session today. So as part of the DNP program, both the students and faculty, we often get together and do a book club. And one of the book clubs that we had recently was on the book by James Clear called Atomic Habits. And so we have all read it, and we've all had a chance to discuss the information inside of it. And when we were thinking about academic resilience and how we can provide some information and insight into how to move through challenges that may come when we're trying to reach our goals, it was discovered that maybe this would be a good book to use to link what James Clear identifies in his book as the laws that we need to use to maybe form better habits. And we thought that this would be a great framework for sharing some tools when we go through the laws on how maybe we can build better habits to overcome those obstacles, build resilience, and then reach our goals. And so the 4 laws that James Clear identifies in his book is that we need to make our habits obvious, we need to make them attractive, we need to make them easy, and they also need to be satisfying. And so the way that the panel session today is going to work is that each of our panelists are going to talk about one of those laws and discuss, a little bit more about it and how they've been able to use that to build a better habit, to overcome, whatever challenges or however they needed to change their process of doing things to then get to where they wanted to go. And in this case, in how they kind of achieve their academic success. And so the other part of the book that James Clear really focuses on is the idea that goals are great, but we really need to think about the process that we're using to get to those goals. And so we are really hopeful that after our panel session today, that you'll come away with a few tools or laws that you can use to build better habits and have a more effective process to use to then pursue the goals that you have. So without further ado, we'll go ahead and get started in our panel discussion. We will have time for some question and answer periods at the end. And so I'll open it up now to Kelly Founderhoff, who is a current student in our program, and she's going to discuss the first law, which is the importance of making a habit obvious.
Hello, everyone. Again, my name is Kelly. So I'm going to first talk about make it obvious. So in my discussion, I do have some quotes from the book, and I give some personal examples too. So any habit can be broken down into a feedback loop that involves 4 steps: cue, craving, response, and reward. When I read this, my brain immediately goes to cognitive behavioral therapy, I guess because I work in psychiatry, which is the type of therapy where you learn to change your automatic thoughts. The theory behind CBT, which is cognitive behavioral therapy, is that you have a thought, then your thought influences your emotions, which influences your behaviors. When you understand how a habit works, it's important to focus on the starting point, the cue, which can help you stick to a new habit or break an old one. A cue is a piece of information that suggests there is a reward to be found, like the smell of a cookie or the golden arches of McDonald's. The cue then influences your thoughts and your behaviors. For example, you may see McDonald's, smell the grease in the air, and pull in the drive-thru for some fries. So the cue is the arches, and your response, and the smell maybe, is pulling in there to get some fries, right? Which may be a bad habit. So if you think about, advertisement in general, advertisements are cues. They motivate us to use whatever product they are selling, but you can use cues to your benefit by setting up kind of good little advertisements for yourself in your life to be successful. When it comes to habits, James Clear, which is the author, suggests that our environment is the invisible hand that shapes the human behavior. That is why a prompt is always the first step in performing any habit. For example, I go to the gym every morning. The night before, I pack my bag. I put in my outfit for work the next day. I pack my gym clothes, and I sit it right next to my bed. So the first thing that I see when I wake up is my packed gym bag sitting next to my bed. So this is a small cue that wakes me up. Well, it doesn't wake me up. But when I wake up, it's the first thing I see. And I'm like, okay, I already have my bag packed. I'm ready to go. So every habit is initiated by a cue. We are more likely to notice cues that stand out. Another example that I use is I have an alarm set on my phone every Wednesday that I have a discussion board post due. For class. So this is a very simple cue, but it obviously alerts me to get my work done. I know my alarm goes off and I'm like, okay, I need to log on. I need to get my work done if I haven't already got it done so I don't forget. So the inversion of the first law of behavior is to make it invisible. One of the most practical ways to eliminate a bad habit is to reduce exposure to the cue that causes it. Okay, so I have used my environment to break bad habits as well as create good habits. When I'm dieting, for example, I have learned that I cannot have any unhealthy foods in my house, or when I see it, I'm gonna eat it. But if there isn't any in my house, I'm happy to snack on like healthier things. If I see a box of Krispy Kremes on my counter, like that's a cue to say, okay, I want a donut. But if I don't, then, I might not be tempted to do that. So another example is that when I'm at work, I set my phone to work mode and I do not receive any text messages during work. This is another like simple thing that breaks the habit of me constantly looking at my phone and not doing things that I need to get done. Another part of my whole cell phone thing is I was very appalled when I saw how many hours I was actually spending on social media. So iPhones now, they tell you how many hours you're on social media, which for me was up to 3 hours a day. And then I'm thinking in my head, well, I'm so stressed over schoolwork and I use 3 hours a day to do schoolwork, I would probably have everything done. So what I actually did is I deleted most of the social media apps off of my phone. So that is getting rid of that cue. You know, you open your phone, you see those social media apps, that in itself is a cue for you to get on there and start scrolling through Facebook and, you know, maybe wasting countless hours that you could be doing schoolwork. And another thing that I did is iPhones now actually have a way to set limit on the time that you spend on social media apps. So I additionally set a timer on my phone's time limit. So if I'm on a social media app for over an hour, my phone alerts me. And then I have an extra 2 hours a day to do schoolwork instead of, you know, doing something mindless on my cell phone. So something as simple as an alert on your phone, like that is a very simple cue that's going to help you avoid getting into a bad habit of, you know, scrolling through social media. So people with high self-control tend to spend less time in tempting situations. It's easier to avoid temptation than resist it. So unfortunately, an important part of my educational success was having to set boundaries with my friends and family. I had to learn to say no to social events and not expose myself to situations where I would possibly lose track of time when time is such a valuable thing when you're in school and working. In summary, you need to set yourself up for success. You can create little cues in your life to improve your habits, and you can also remove triggers of bad habits from your environment.
All right. Thank you so much, Kelly. That was wonderful. What a great start. Some really great ideas on how to make our habits more obvious so that we can build those better habits. So now we're going to be turning to our next idea here, our next law, which is going to be on how to make the habit attractive. But before we get there, this is, I think Dr. Lorette Flannery is able to join us. So Lorette, if you're able to hear us, if you want to, I'm not sure she's able to have video, but if she can hear us, you can maybe introduce yourself, tell us a little bit more about who you are, what you do, a little bit on the background, what you studied during your doctoral work, and then you can lead us into the importance of making a habit attractive.
Hi there, this is Lorette Flannery. How are all of you? I am calling from West Virginia today, and we're having an issue with the camera because I'm unable to open it. So IT is working on it. However, I started out my work in physical therapy many years ago, which intrigued me because I became involved in wound care. And wound care had led me to being a certified wound care nurse and nurse practitioner. And my doctoral thesis was how to decipher whether or not patients would find a positive outcome through a telehealth nurse navigation program for patients with lower extremity vascular ulcers. So that is my background. I'm addressing the second law of behavior, which is making change attractive. So the previous section focused on cues, making things more obvious if we want to build a new habit, or making them invisible if we want to remove a bad habit. Clear wants us to understand human biology and how the experience of the human condition creates instincts that are innate to all of us as human beings. So this supernormal stimuli of our modern world exaggerates features that are naturally attractive to us. Our instincts go wild as a result. And that's what drives us to excessive behaviors revolving around eating and shopping and texting and social media habits. And Clear tells us that we have primarily innate three groups that we are drawn to: the close, the many, and the powerful. And we tend to imitate those groups, the people that we spend day-to-day time with, where we can build better habits by joining cultures where that desired behavior is normal. So we want to get close to groups where we want to be more like that behavior. The normal behavior of people that surround us will often overpower that desire to the behavior of the individual that we are. So for example, if we want to cook healthier, and despite our work schedules being so busy and school schedules being so busy in our life and all of our obligations, we tend to turn to pre-made foods and things with high carbs and high sodium. So what can we do to deter that behavior? We can try to find a group of people that perhaps cook healthier, or join a group that would cook healthier, and that would lead us to a better behavior. Often our daily habits are imitations of people that we desire. So we are drawn to perhaps a matriarch in our family, or we want to be like that person who might give us that stimuli to be someone who is esteemed, or, you know, we get credit for the things that we do. And I know in my family, it was always my grandmother. My grandmother owned a dress factory, and she stimulated me to be a go-getter. So I think that's why I pretty much try to do that as well. So in order for us to make a habit enticing, we have to understand what a craving is and how it works. Dopamine is a type of neurotransmitter. It makes your body and your nervous system send messages between the nerve cells. That's why it's sometimes called a chemical messenger. And dopamine plays a role in how we feel pleasure. It's a part of our unique human ability to think and plan, and it helps us strive, focus, and find things interesting. So when it comes to habits, the key takeaway is that dopamine is released not only when the person experiences pleasure, but when that pleasure is anticipated. So the example I had for that was gambling. Gambling addicts exhibit a dopamine spike right before they place their bet, not after they win or lose. So interestingly, the anticipation of that reward and not the fulfillment of it is what gets us to take action. So anticipation is the greatest craving, and you have to create more promise for rewards that your actions lead to. So this is why we need to make our habits more attractive, because it's anticipation of the experience that motivates us to act in the first place. That's why advertisements work. We see a good-looking person use a product and they get some reward, and maybe they attract some good-looking person or get a job they desire, or get a better life that they have. And therefore, when we use that product, we anticipate that something in our life is going to get better. So making something attractive doesn't always mean making it glamorous. Sometimes we're attracted to not something we desire or not something we need. In order to improve positive habits, we have to find and fix the bad habits. And Clear gives us the strategy of temptation bundling to make the habits we want to build more attractive. Temptation bundling is when we do one desired activity with a habit you want to form. So my example was that I really enjoy a good decaf caramel macchiato from the Starbucks. I found that taking my computer to Starbucks and ordering my favorite drink to consume while I was doing my assignments, just with no distraction, was very satisfying. I could return home after getting my assignments done. I did not have to worry about balancing that coursework with obligations at home. And I did that every Sunday. And that became so attractive to me that I would add 2 days during the week. And that would just work out great for me. And I began to crave that satisfaction of accomplishment. And so that is my portion of law number 2.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Flannery. And so glad that you're able to join us here. Even if we can't see you, we could hear you, and we appreciate the information you provided. You gave us lots to think about, and really the importance of surrounding ourselves with those that support us and can motivate us. So we'll keep moving along here. So up next, we will hear from Dr. Weinberg about why it is important to make the habit easy.
I want to ask, sound is okay? I'm actually down in the studio, so the furnace is going. I apologize if it rumbles a little bit. As long as you can hear me okay, that's good. So we're good? All right. All right, so I'm going to talk about, yes, the third law, make it easy. So in preparing for today's panel, I was thinking about this, and I'm, thinking about, we're talking about making habit, creating habits. So I decided to look up the definition of a habit. What is a habit? And by a very reputable dictionary, I looked at the definition, and I came up with this. A behavior habit is a behavior pattern acquired by frequent repetition or physiologic exposure that shows itself in irregularity or increased facility of performance. Now that's pretty wordy. So this is what it means to me. And I think to boil down is a habit is a repeated action that produces a certain behavior. Okay. So, in thinking about habit formation and making habits, I want to make this premise here that a habit is an action that produces a behavior. Okay. So in thinking of that, part of Law 3, making it easy, the author, James Clear, talks about this idea of motion versus action, okay? So an example of this, James Clear uses it to demonstrate this. He talks about, he says, you want to write an article, okay? So he said, you can outline 10 good ideas for an article, but never write the article itself, right? You think about it, you research it, you talk about it, you look at other people's articles, even to becoming envious of how their incredible ability to be so prophetic, right? You want to write this article, but you never do. He calls this being in motion. You're moving, you're thinking, you're doing, right? And it has its purpose, but action is when you actually sit down and write the article. You actually do the behavior. So again, when you're in motion, you're planning, you're strategizing, you're learning. When you're in action, you actually produce a result. And that's what he talks about when we talk about motion versus action. It really comes down to whether we produce something or we don't produce something. And when he talks about habit forming and this idea of motion and action, he says we get bogged down in trying to find the best approach for change this motion that we never really get around to actually taking action to make a change, right? And if you think about this, we talk about habit formation. We want to make better habits, better study habits, right, to be able to get better grades. And we can think about that, but it's really the action that we take. So during COVID, is when I was doing my doctoral work, and of course, as student, you have those days where you're just like, oh, I can't do this anymore. I've had enough. I can't think. And I remember this one day, I decided, you know what? I'm not doing a thing. I grabbed my blanket, I wrap myself up on the couch, and I flip on Netflix. I'm going to watch a movie, right? So I look through the suggestions, wonderful AI that, heard the things. And anyways, I find this movie and I start watching it, and it's about this young girl with her mom, and there's a estrangement between the mother and the father. I think it's that maybe the father was a professor of the mother, and hence she came about. And her mother's this brilliant-minded mathematician, as shown by when the little girl takes her mother's PhD dissertation on quantum mathematics and throws it in the fire. And then through tragedy, she loses her mother and becomes an orphan, and she meets this janitor, and she learns how to play chess. And then she becomes the first female chess player, champion, grandmaster of the world. And I am obsessed with this movie. I love it. It speaks to me. And I want to be a chess player. I want to play chess. I remember thinking this, I want to play chess, right? So, but then I started thinking about, playing chess. And I started thinking, but then I'm gonna have to, I gotta start learning about, opening sequences, like the close Sicilian, and then mid-game theory and end-game strategy, and there's so much to learn, and I just sort of start thinking about it, and how I can do this. It wasn't until one morning, 1 o'clock in the morning to be exact, I'm sitting there, and it's after watching this movie for probably the 6th time, and I'm laying there in bed, and I think, I want to play chess. I want to play chess. And I think about it, and I'm thinking, if I want to play chess, I got to actually play chess, right? So lo and behold, next to me is that glowing box of information and access, and I get on, and I go to the app store, and I find an app that is learn how to play chess by playing chess, and I download it, and I start playing chess. And needless to say, 6 o'clock in the morning, I went to bed knowing a little how to play chess. And from that point on, I started playing chess. And actually, my habit is that I actually play one game of chess before I go to bed at night. I am proud to say that I have been able to checkmate my 7-year-old nephew, who is a formidable chess player. I don't know how he plays chess the way he does, but I've been able to checkmate him. And it's through actually taking this action of actually playing chess and learning how to do it and doing it over and over again. It's taking that action is really where the rub is in this, is that going back to the premise of a habit is an action that produces a behavior. You have to know, it's good to know when you're in motion and when you're taking action. When you're in motion, you're not producing anything, but actually taking an action gets you started, and part of habits is taking actions to produce a behavior. So how this relates again in study is that you have to know when you are wasting so much time or in that time of motion. Again, you want to form better study habits. You got to think about the action that would actually take you to be able to start forming those habits for better study.
That is great information. And I wonder how many of our listeners, and I am one of them, that we have been stuck in that motion, and we think, making progress because we are doing something, but we're not actually doing what we need to be doing to produce the outcome or get to that outcome. And we've all been there. And I would be curious to hear, when we open it up for discussion, what other people feel like, what are some things that maybe you felt like you were doing in motion, but didn't actually then move it to action. So some really good things to think about there, Brian. So thank you for sharing. So we'll move on then to the final law. And so certainly it's the last one, but this is not, certainly not by least, that we are hearing from Heather, but she's going to share with us how we should make habits satisfying. And this will then wrap up the laws, and then we can open it up for some discussion. Take it away, Heather.
Thank you. So yes, make it satisfying, which I would agree is certainly not the last of the foundations of the habit loop. I would argue that it is one of the key most important parts of the habit loop, aside from performing the habit itself. Although if you take away the cue, you don't have any habit, which goes to show you that the habit loop is in fact a loop and you need all three. So what do we mean by make it satisfying? Basically what we need to do is to add some pleasure to our habit, right? When, you heard my colleagues talk about, for example, the McDonald's example or a chocolate chip cookie example. The cue might be the smell, the habit might be eating it, and then the satisfying part is, of course, the taste, right? The joy that we get. And so our bad habits are very easily locked in because those pleasure, that pleasure trigger, that satisfying trigger is built into those items. What we need to do in terms of academic resilience or resilience in life in general is to hack that loop and basically tag something pleasurable to a habit that we want to create, right? Not just lean on those bad habits, but make a good habit by adding that pleasure point. So I lost track of so let me give you an example. For some people, exercise already has that built-in pleasure, right? That, you've got your runner's high, you've got people that, do aerobics classes and they feel great afterwards. So it's a built-in pleasure, right? They have the cue to go work out, they work out, and then they just feel naturally good. For some of us, that it's not necessarily automatically there, because when you first start exercising, it does not always feel great. You need to add that pleasure yourself, right? You need to add that satisfying feature. An example that I used is I got a treadmill. A friend of mine said, well, are you using it? Not so much. But she said, well, how about every day you give me a proof of life? So I had an accountability partner, right? So every day you send me a selfie, prove that you were on the treadmill. And so I started doing that. I would get up, I would get on the treadmill, I would do my exercise. So the cue for me was shoes by the door, go downstairs, do the treadmill. That was the habit. And then afterwards, I would take a selfie of myself, thumbs up, because I'm sending a picture, and then I would send it to her, right? I am not still sending her selfies 6 months later, but I still take it. I still take it because after I get off the treadmill, I have this little pleasure blissful moment where I'm smiling at myself with a thumbs up. It seems little, it seems goofy, and I have no makeup and look terrible at 6 o'clock in the morning, but it's hard to argue with having someone smile at you, even if it's only yourself after a hard workout. So that's what I mean by adding something pleasurable to your habit. Now, when it comes to academics, right? This is an academic resilience presentation webinar after all. I wanted to come up with a couple strategies for people to start thinking about how we could use this habit loop in academics. Laurette talked about what she did, which was to go to Starbucks and have a specific time for when she did her studying. And so I kind of, that's part of what I was thinking about, is that we don't want to just become taskmasters when it comes to being in education. We want to be studious people, right? We want to identify ourselves as the type of person that does academic work. And so you want to create a habit for yourself. Laurette had a Sunday afternoon habit. For those of you who have a heavier course load that is maybe not in a like a co-learning program where we're working full-time and you're a full-time student, then being a student is really your job. So finding a time of day such as, after dinner every day, or at a certain time that is free in your schedule every day to clock in, I'm going to do 30 to 45 minutes, at that time frame, would be a way to create a studying habit. And habits are best when they're repeated. So a daily habit would be ideal. Now you might think, well, I don't always have a test to study for or what have you, but when you're a student, you do, right? You always have something that you could be reading, something that you could be presenting, one project to work on. And so if you have a habit every single day, I'm going to work for 30 minutes, you'd be surprised at how little you have to cram right before something is done. And then what you want to do is create the satisfying piece. What can I do after that 30 minutes or 45 minutes every day that's going to make me crave it, make me want it next time? That might be for you scrolling TikTok, watching your favorite show, basically not doing those things in preparation for your reward after you do your study work. Playing video games, whatever the case may be, you have to kind of come up with your reward and then make sure you give it to yourself every time you do your study habit. Another example that is something that I use in my project is tracking. And James Clear talks a lot about that in his book as well, because tracking is a way of creating a reward for yourself after you do a habit that you want to keep, for two reasons. Number one, you get the pleasure of, after doing something, either tracking by giving yourself a gold star on a calendar, for example, or you can use an app in your phone. There are several habit tracking apps where you basically are now giving yourself a little check mark or a little colored block. And not only do you have that pleasure right after you do the thing, but also when you look at your trend line, you look at your progress bar, so to speak, it is very satisfying to feel like you've accomplished all of those things. So every time you study, if you give yourself that gold star or put that check mark in your habit tracker, that is a way to give yourself that little dopamine hit that Laurette talked about to, make you crave it, make you want it next time. Oh, I need to study. I need to track it, right? I don't want to break my streak. For example, I know streaks are something that are often used in social media because they're so effective in getting people to continue behavior. It's a way to kind of gamifying your life and your habits in a good way, not in a I'm going to spend all the day on social media way. Another kind of takeoff from that is, what I did throughout my academic career, and this is now my 4th degree, I believe, that I'm working on completing, is I would take the whole semester and create a grid for, where there was a box for every day. And in that whole 16 weeks, I would have every assignment written out so that I could see when my problem areas were, I have a test and a paper and a presentation due that same day. So you can see a semester at a glance, and B, that becomes its own tracker, so that as you go through your semester, you're crossing off not only the assignments that you did, but the semester itself and seeing your progress through your academic courses. So that is another satisfying way. Going back to my doctoral project, we've all kind of touched on, food, because food is a huge motivator. Notice when I was talking about creating your habit of being a studious person and putting that time in, I did not say eat chocolate. But using food to create a habit is highly effective, right? Pavlov's dogs. How do they train dolphins to do tricks, right? They give little fish. It works on us too, sadly, people. So that can be something that is useful, but we have a real obesity problem in this country, so that's why I didn't recommend it. And my project is actually tracking diet to help with weight loss, because we know that those of us who struggle with our weight, we do better if we track our food, if we track our weight, if we track our exercise, because what we track, we focus on. So that's why I wanted to use that specific example for academics, because I've studied it extensively for weight loss and it's effective there. So it is truly what you track, you change, and something that I highly recommend, that if you aren't tracking something in your life and there's a habit that you want to build, that you highly consider using that strategy, because it can be very effective. All right, I think that's everything that I wanted to cover. Thank you.
That is wonderful. And you made me hungry. Everyone's making me hungry. And I am definitely a proponent of the chocolate. I prefer the dark chocolate. I always say that that's healthier than the milk. So that's why I feel like I can use that as my satisfying reward. But thank you, Heather, for the great information and the strategies and real world application that you and all the panelists were able to share. And so now it's time that we would like to provide for those that are listening to open it up to any questions or comments for our panelists related to either their work or either to the book or the laws. So yes, please, I guess, use the chat or I'm not sure if how it will work, but we'll get them if anybody has a question.
There are several questions in the chat. I'm just looking at those. Dr. Moyer, are you able to see those, or would you like for me to read them?
I do see them now. So it looks like, so this was questions from some students. From your introduction, I gathered you are all doctors of working towards it. What advice would you give to students who lack sleep, working, or gaming?
I would love to talk about sleep for a second as a primary care provider. It is so underutilized as a stress management technique and as an overall health technique. I don't have, we are talking about habits. Just as Kelly was talking about in creating cues, it is very important for good sleep hygiene to create a cue that it's time to sleep for yourself. And there's a whole slew of things that you can do, including creating a dark, cool room, getting rid of all light sources, stop using electronic devices an hour before, which is part of the problem, right? That's what's keeping us up in the first place. But and also using time, right? Time is a cue as well, and a very powerful one. So getting yourself on a routine. But there is such good evidence that lack of sleep can lead to psychosis, but lack of sleep basically leads to Alzheimer's and obesity and poor mental functioning and just overall poor health. So we know that you will live better, do better, and be healthier if you sleep more. So I highly recommend it. And working through good sleep hygiene is usually the first start.
I'd like to speak about that regarding making it attractive. So I have tended to find that things like lavender scented spray for your pillow, or just buying new linens for your bed, something that motivates you to want to lay down and relax in that environment. So just making it an attractive environment to sleep in.
And I don't know, did anybody want to speak to the gaming part? We certainly know how important, we have the technology at our fingertips all the time, and we can obviously take it with us to bed. And so I can see that some people may be playing on their devices while laying down, which would not necessarily promote the best sleep. So how do we kind of, does anybody want to speak to the gaming aspect? How do we, develop good habits where we maybe use gaming as the reward, or make, that's what we can do after we've done something? Does anybody have any thoughts on how to use some of these laws related to that?
So I can add that, just like I said, I have a thing on my phone that tells me when I've been on social media too long. You can set that with game apps too. So setting limits and structuring your schedule, I think, that goes with all of that. Like having a structured schedule is what's going to improve your sleep. That, you're not staying up till 3 a.m. one night playing video games and then the next night trying to go to bed at 10 o'clock. Like having a structure is important. setting limits on those activities. So it is more like a reward for you. So like, I forget which one of you were talking about. But like say you, or I think it was Heather, like you're going to study every day between 5:30 and 6. Well, then at 6 o'clock, you allow yourself to play video games from 6 to 7 or 6 to 6:30, you know, and having that structure in your evening is what's going to, you know, the gaming is going to be the reward, but then also having a limit on how much time you're spending, because if you're gaming all night, or even just looking at that screen, having your brain being like that active, you're not going to get good restful sleep. So cutting off those games probably at least an hour before you want to start going to sleep would definitely be necessary.
That's great. And then another question, it looks like, said, how do you program good habits in your head so you can have the will to do what is required? That was another question coming from a student.
I would like to actually answer that. You know, it's sort of thinking about, you know, this motion versus action, you know, to form these, it's again, sort of thinking about what action can I take to actually do this? You know, what, again, I think, you know, to program these things, you know, we start thinking about it, and it's really about taking that action to be able to start that habit. And that's really sort of where this motion versus action comes into, is taking that and, you know, finding that action that you can take to start that habit. I think it's really sort of the crux of being able to program good habits in your head, is finding that action to start that behavior or that habit.
I would also say that when it comes to will and willpower, the whole point of developing a habit is so that you don't need it, right? So we have willpower. We know that it expires, right? Throughout the day, if we're hungry, if we're tired, we no longer can, you know, we don't make the same decisions first thing in the morning that we're going to make late in the evening after a long, hard day. So the whole point of creating a habit is that we no longer thinking. We don't have to, you know, force ourselves to have willpower, right? So for example, you don't have to force yourself to do the whole workout at once, right? You see the shoes, you put them on. So all your willpower needs to do is start that habit. You just need enough to put on the shoes, and then your body goes into automatic pilot. So if you start a habit that you're doing the same thing over and over again, it's built in, right? You're no longer, it's no longer a conscious act, it's a subconscious act. And that's how it becomes successful. You don't want to, you know, have to force yourself to be the kind of person that eats well or exercises or studies every day. You become the type of person that does that because you are the type of person that does that. It's on an automatic track. Everything that you can take out of your conscious decision making is going to, in the long run, be something that you can repeat and don't have to have willpower for.
I want to add something really quick to that. So, funny example is, like I said, I go to the gym every morning. It took me a while for that to actually be a habit. But today I actually didn't go to the gym, which is odd for me. But every morning I have the same routine, and I usually wake up, I take the medications that I'm prescribed, and then I go to the gym. So I didn't go to the gym today, so I actually forgot to take my medicine. So this is like the power of my habit, is like, it is like a natural course progression of my morning, is like I do A, B, C. And because I missed A, I forgot B. Like they are very powerful, your habits.
Yeah, and I think just kind of tagging onto that, there was another question that came in from a student who suffers serious anxiety and gets nervous for what others may consider to be petty things. And I think they're just wondering, you know, what would we recommend them to do? It affects their studies. And I'm thinking this kind of tags into what Heather and Kelly, what you were just kind of discussing. I think it's important maybe to speak about, you know, how it's not about doing it all at one time, but taking those small steps. And that's why, again, the book is entitled Atomic Habits, because the idea is that small changes that we can make can then lead to bigger impacts. And so I don't know if anybody has anything that they would want to speak, you know, specifically to the anxiety aspect, or just have any other ideas or strategies that could maybe be useful for situations like this, where maybe you feel like you have all of this to do, but how do you just, you know, start with one small step?
I can answer this one since I'm the psychiatric NP. So for anxiety, I'm just going to start by saying I myself, I have anxiety. I also have had depression in my life. I get it. It's hard. One of the things that I've learned to really help manage my own anxiety is it's a theory called acceptance. It's a CBT actually theory. So it's accepting things that are what's in our control and what's outside of our control. So there are very limited things that are actually within our control, only ourselves and how we respond to situations. So the theory behind this is that you shouldn't be worrying about things that are outside of your control, because no matter what, you can't really change them. All you can change is kind of how you're responding to them. So I think that's one way to think about it. Let me read the rest of the question. So again, with me, a huge part of my relief of anxiety is the gym. That's how I start my day every day. I know that sounds like a cliche thing, but when you go to the gym, it actually increases the same neurotransmitters that the psychiatric medications that we prescribe affect. The serotonin, dopamine, norepinephrine, those pleasure, happiness hormones is what is relieved by going to the gym. So starting a gym habit, you would be amazed how once that's a part of your day, how much it makes your day better. My fiance will actually, like, if I'm having a bad day, he will say to me, "Did you go to the gym today?" And usually my answer is no. So it's kind of funny how he's actually like identified that in me, that when on days that I don't go to the gym, I am in a lot of a worse mood. I think that's about it. I have that one. There was something else now I'm forgetting. I do have something. Yes. So another way to look at problems too is think of it on a scale. So you're saying you're getting upset about little things. So what I always used to think too is like, so on a scale of like 0 to the world is ending, where is this problem? How much of my actual time do I need to spend being worried about it? Another way to think about this is like, if it's not going to matter in 5 years, maybe we shouldn't spend more than about 5 minutes worrying about it. That's like the 5 and 5 rule. So thinking about it on like a larger scale of like, is this problem really that big? And then trying to like accept, maybe what you can change about the problem, and ways to maybe how you can respond to it differently.
That's great. Thank you. Great that you could use your expertise as well. All right. I want to make sure that we're staying mindful of the time. Panelists, do you have any, I do have some concluding remarks, but does anybody have anything that they would like to share that they are thinking about before we kind of conclude our discussion here?
Sorry, there was a question about dependency on
did I miss one?
Drugs. Yeah.
I'm not sure. I don't know if I know what the question is. So it looks like they're asking prescription drugs and they affect their studies. I'm not sure that I know what the question is or is there any more elaboration, or if the panelists want to, I'm not sure how best to address it.
I think that might be more along the medical lines. That might not be the best to answer within this panel. I think that in general, what we talked about with what Kelly talked about with creating cues for good habits and eliminating cues for bad habits is in general, probably what we would lean on when talking about managing things. But I think outside of kind of the habits that we're talking about, we might be getting a little medical and probably shouldn't be giving advice in this context.
Right. And I would want to know more about what the question was to be able to most effectively answer it. So hopefully, that some of the things that were discussed today may be helpful to help with that question, whatever it may be. But I hope I didn't miss any others. Was that all that came in there?
I don't see any other.
Okay. All right. Well, like I said, I do want to be mindful of the time. So I do want to take a moment now just to, again, really express my gratitude and thanks to our panelists today, both our current students in our DNP and our graduate students from our DNP program. I also want to say thank you to the Millersville University Academic Resilience team for the invitation to come and be a part of this panel session today and allowing us to participate and share some insights. Just for conclusion purposes, as you have heard from our panelists and what they've alluded to, is that building better habits can be broken down into making those small changes that can really have those lasting effects. And so I would just encourage everyone that as you pursue your academic goals specifically, but also it could be personal or professional goals, that you stay mindful of the process that you're using and consider the laws that were described today by our panelists. Again, reminding you that a habit should be obvious, attractive, easy, and satisfying as you build better habits to be most successful. And I wanted to leave James Clear in his book, and I see that the book was placed into the chat. So if you're interested in reading it, certainly seek it out. But he does provide a lot of insight in his book and provides a lot of neat quotes. And so I thought it would be really neat to kind of end with some of his quotes. And one thing he really emphasizes is that whenever we want to transform our behavior and transform who we want to be, it does take time. And so one thing I want to leave everyone with is that patience is needed to reach your full potential. And so here highly recommends that you walk slowly, but never backwards. So I just want to say thank you again, everyone, for joining us. And on behalf of the panel here, we hope that everyone has a great day.
Thank you so much, everyone, for logging in. Thank you, the panelists. You've done a wonderful job, and we really appreciate. As Anne said earlier, this is recorded and it will be watched, I know, by so many other people. Thank you again. Thank you, Susan, for moderating. We greatly appreciate.